So we're talking tonight about Chojun Miyagi. I'm going to start a series of talks that I started probably years ago and never got to the next bit of it because I wanted to wait until we put up the pictures of the masters, which we finally did since we're in the new dojo. So I've talked both about Damo Buddha Dharma and Chen Sang Feng, so the founders of Kung Fu, the founder of Tai Chi. And so the next picture in order on our pictures of the masters is Chojun Miyagi. And the next time you guys are here, you'll just look up when you're walking onto the mats and you'll see who this is that I'm talking about. So I'm going to give a little bit of information. I'll kind of talk about his life and some famous quotes. And these are all inspirational martial artists that we've got pictures of. Nobody is like a dumper of a person. So Chojun Miyagi was born in Naha, which is in Japan, I assume, in April 25th, 1888. And it says from a young age he was strong and athletic. He was involved in sports and other physical activities. He started karate training with Ryoku Aragaki. And at the age of 14, his teacher realized Chojun was a serious student and introduced him to the Nahate master Kanryo Hagaona, and I'm going to just fully butcher every single Japanese name except Miyagi. Oh, and if you're wondering how come Miyagi sounds familiar to you, it's because this is the basis for the character of Mr. Miyagi from the Karate Kid movies. This is the original Mr. Miyagi, but his master Chojun Miyagi. So he was introduced to this new master, and he trained with him until his master's death in 1915. In his last few years, Chojun Miyagi took in his teacher and cared for him like it was his own father. And Miyagi would end up traveling to China several times to study where his master had studied. So this is in another article that I read about Miyagi's life. It said that he was the son of a merchant, a pretty prominent, wealthy merchant who had ships that were always going back and forth to China. So this was kind of an ideal situation for him. Most people at that time just couldn't go back and forth between different countries and across the ocean willy-nilly, but Miyagi could, so he did it. He would end up traveling several times to study where his master had studied. And this was in the Fujian province of China. And his friend, Gokenki, accompanied him on several trips. Gokenki was Chinese and a master of white crane kung fu, so he likely acted as an interpreter for Miyagi and introduced him to some local masters in China. This reminds me of Sifu Brown. So some of you guys who have not heard about Sifu Brown's practice, he actually studied some Japanese styles of martial arts and then discovered kung fu. He didn't discover it, but he saw somebody practicing it and decided, that looks great, I'm going to practice kung fu too. And he actually traveled to China. It's easier nowadays than it was way back when with Miyagi, but it was still a pretty difficult trip for Sifu Brown to go, who also does not speak Chinese and also had to have a translator. But that's a story for a different meditation class. So he also trained in some local Chinese martial arts, and then when he returned to Okinawa, he combined the Chinese arts with Nahate, as well as his own influences to create what we now call Gojinru. So this is also kind of similar to Sifu Brown, who practiced Japanese styles and Chinese styles and influence from both. The name Goju came from a poem. It means hard, soft. So similar to our style, hard, soft. And it's kind of an allusion to the way that the physical practice is and also the philosophy of the practice, like ours. So it's like yin and yang. There's hard and soft. There's hard blocks, hard strikes, soft blocks, soft strikes. And if you are hitting a hard target, you use something soft like your palm to hit somebody's skull. If you're hitting a soft target like somebody's belly or somebody's midsection, you'd use the knuckles, something hard. So it's the way that everything kind of fits in together in the physical art and in the universe. It's all the same. So since Miyagi came from, this is kind of going further into that. Miyagi came from a wealthy family. He was able to devote his full time studying karate do. His merchant business allowed him to travel back and forth freely, and in a way he was born with the perfect circumstances to become a true master of martial arts. So this reminds me of me, even though my family is not super wealthy merchants going to and from China. It's like, it makes things easier to be able to devote your time to something that to a lot of people, honestly, including my parents, seems frivolous. Like practicing martial arts, who has time to do that and like has the audacity to make it your living? And I think that I was totally lucky to just be able to do something like this and not have to worry about someday, well, if I don't make it here, if I don't really like do well and get lots of students, I could end up on the street. So we're all lucky. He eventually opened his own dojo in Naha and started teaching. Teaching was done in his backyard, known as the Garden Dojo. His training was very hard and severe. Not many students were able to endure it. One of the articles that I read, it was by one of his students, and he was talking about how he started with some of the people that he knew, and they were kids basically, and at one point one of his friends quit, and then there were 3 students left. So not many people could endure it. The training was also fairly boring by today's standards. Boring is in quotations. It was reported that he only taught Sanshin and Hojo for the first few years. So Sanshin is actually the last form that you guys learn here. It's a very ancient form, and it is very, very simple. Very difficult in lots of, intricacies and subtleties, but when you compare it to the flashiness of our other form, Sanshin looks like, I don't want to show you too much, but it looks like this. And so this is like very old style. And Sibu Brown has told stories about, old school training, which is you don't even get to do the punches. You just do the feet. So you go in, and for the first several years, you're just going like this. Can you see my feet on this video? It doesn't matter. Anyways, they get the idea. I'm just walking forward. And then when you get advanced, then they let you do this. Walk backwards. And if you can imagine just doing that for years and years, and some of these training sessions were for hours long, a lot of people probably would not have the attention span to stick with it, but those who did became great. So students would either leave due to boredom and impatience or due to the severity of the training. Chojun Miyagi's students were recognized at the local bathhouse by the bruises on their bodies. In addition to his private teachings at home, he taught at the Naha Police Academy as well as in high schools. So Miyagi was well known and respected by the people of Okinawa. He was very humble and certainly a man of his word. So much so that even after the war, he and Toguchi traveled together to Itoman in order for Miyagi to repay a small debt to another man that was previously incurred. Miyagi was against using karate as a way of making money. Students would still generally give him a gift as a sign of appreciation. He was described as being gentle and friendly, and Toguchi reported that he and Miyagi had many long discussions following the training. So I'm assuming Toguchi was one of the students. Another one of the articles said that they would practice for a couple of hours, but the training sessions would last I think it was from 3 o'clock in the afternoon until 8 o'clock at night. And they would just talk afterwards for hours and hours, which is wonderful if you've got that much time to spend with your sensei. Miyagi, like many others, was devastated by the war. He lost several of his children as well as one of his best students. I cannot honestly tell you which war this is. I'm going to assume that it was the first, maybe it was the Second World War. Anyway, it's one of the wars. He lost several of his children as well as one of his best students. Many people speculated that his student would have been the likely successor to Miyagi if he hadn't died. Following the war, Miyagi's health began to deteriorate rapidly. He was plagued by high blood pressure, among other illnesses. And by 1952, he was teaching mostly while sitting in a chair. You guys know that one of my favorite things to talk about is how I'm going to die teaching martial arts. But I love the idea of just teaching no matter what and hoping that people will still show up, even if I just have to teach from a chair. And my mom always asks me every time I complain about my back hurting, what are you going to do if you get hurt? You're not going to be able to teach. Yes, I will. I'll be in a wheelchair and I'll teach Chin-A. Or if my arms get broken, I'll teach kicking. But there's always a way to do it. And Toguchi described him as not being able to walk more than a block without having to rest. In 1953, Miyagi suffered a heart attack and died in his home as a result at the age of 65. The stress of the war, along with the loss of so many close to him, must have taken its toll. I'm going to guess that means that it was World War II. So prior to Miyagi's death, his students were in the process of drawing up a standard testing curriculum as well as requirements for the Dan rank. First Dan is black belt. Unfortunately, Miyagi died before this could be completed. Miyagi had never named a successor or given a Dan rank, a black belt, to anyone. He had never given anybody a black belt. He believed that only the Dai Nippon Butoku Kai had the authority to do so. So this is a man who had a ton of students, even though at some point he only had 3 at a time in the class, and he just never gave out a black belt. Like Sifu Brown for years and years just never gave out the rank of black. And it's kind of amazing to see that, because nowadays, especially in this country, but pretty much everywhere the martial arts is taught, it's all about like getting the next rank and getting your black belts. And in most schools you go in and they have a black belt up on the wall, and it says black belt is our goal. And in some places, like you come in, you sign up, they actually put your black belt up on the wall, and they tell you this is how many classes you have to come to. They don't tell you how much money you have to pay, but this is what you're going to get. This is all that we care about. And they didn't even have black belts. And they practice outside in the garden, so they couldn't have put the belts up anyways. So when he died, the Gojin-Ryu world was left in a bit of disarray. We can only wonder what Gojin-Ryu would have looked like if Miyagi had lived another 20 years or so. In the end, each of his senior students founded their own school based on their interpretation of Chojun Miyagi's vision and ideals. And each one is unique in its approach. And today, Gojin-Ryu is spread across the world and is practiced by millions of people worldwide. And some of the other masters that are up on the wall are actually from this lineage of Chojun Miyagi. So you'll probably hear about that later on in another talk. I like this idea of discussing, even though it's kind of gruesome, but like somebody dies, the founder of this martial art dies, and he has compiled all of this incredible knowledge and experience and made this beautiful thing. And when the founder dies, oftentimes what happens is that's it. It's like, here is the book of Gojin-Ryu. They close the book. This is everything that is written about this style. We're never changing it. And so some of his students went off and made their own styles, but Gojin-Ryu remains largely unchanged to this day. And so the speculation of what would it have been like if he had survived 20 more years, I don't know. Nobody knows. What would most of the styles, the traditional styles of martial arts, look like? They would have changed. What if he had died 10 years earlier? It would have been different then. So, we're kind of lucky in that way that we practice a style with a philosophy that's a little bit more fluid, and so we continue to grow and we continue to evolve as things come up that make sense and that work. We continue to use them. I've got a few quotes from Chojun Miyagi. So I'm going to start with some of the more well-known ones. He says, "Do not strike others and do not allow others to strike you. The goal is peace without incident." And that is an interesting thing to hear from somebody who made his fortune, as it were, and became famous for teaching martial arts, punching and kicking people, and to have this kind of understanding that our goal is not really to just beat people up. It's to avoid the conflict. It's to be able to handle the situation without seriously hurting the other person or without getting yourself hurt. This is what we talk about as the highest level of self-defense, is I don't have to destroy this other person, and I might know how to, but if you have the wherewithal, if you have the mental strength, if you are able to keep yourself calm enough, you don't end up just killing the other person and destroying them. You're able to defend yourself. You're able to take the situation under control without it getting out of control and without it getting out of hand further than it needed to go. So Miyagi said, "If you practice only Sanshin all your life, you do not have to practice any other kata. Sanshin is so essential and important." So that's the form that's super basic and super simple. One day I asked him, "How many times do you practice basically, how many times do you practice Sanshin before you think that you've performed it well? Miyagi says, I think I performed Sanshin well once out of 30 times. At that time, he was young, 34 or 35 years old, and his words are still impressive to me. So I think that being able to recognize that what we do is still in its early stages, we hope, right? We want to be able to practice for years to come, and we've got to recognize that if we do that what we do is going to continue to get better and better and better. But to have this kind of self-awareness and to look at it and say, Miyagi was likely one of the best Sanshin practitioners on the planet at that time. And to say, I do it well once out of 30 times. So when the rest of us do a form, how well are we really doing it? Sometimes we think of it like, I suck, I never do this well at all. And that might be true. You might be wrong. You might do it well once out of every 30 times or 100 times. But some people think, I'm pretty sweet at this form. I've been doing it for an entire year, and I'm pretty sure it's great every single time I do it. Well, that's ridiculous too. And it depends on, the way that you're looking at it, what kind of eye for detail you've got for your own form. And sometimes it's difficult, but it's important to always look at this as a possibility. The possibility that what I'm doing might be greater than I think that it is. It might be worse than I think that it is, but always looking for some room to improve is huge. So, Goju is the willow tree blown by the strong wind, said Miyagi-sensei. The strong wind blows the willow. The willow never resists the wind, just remains passive, but will never be broken or destroyed. In this way, we take advantage of the opponent's strength flow. It's a secret of the arts that we have to master through this practice. So I think of it, a tree. I usually make the distinction between like an oak tree and a reed blowing in the wind. But if you look at the willow, I guess it's got kind of both, because it's got all those dangly branches that blow in the wind, and it's very dramatic. But it's also got its solid, unmovable trunk. And so you want to be able to flow with the energy, whether it's your partner's energy or the energy of whatever it is we're dealing with in life, yet remain rooted and remain unbroken. And it's a very difficult thing to do. We usually end up being rooted, and when things get really hard or rough, then we get knocked over and uprooted, and it takes us forever to recover from that. Or we're super flowy and we go with the flow of everything, and we're not really rooted in anything, and we're just blown about, and one day we could be over here with this kind of set of principles, and the next day we're over here with something completely different. So it's a difficult balance to strike, but that's really what we're trying to do through our practice. He says, we should always be cautious when we turn at the corner of a road, walk along a rainy street, and climb up and down a ladder. It will become useful for self-defense if we have practiced karate sufficiently hard and are accustomed to being cautious. As a result of a long time of training, we can obtain the so-called sixth sense and can notice if someone is following. So I chose this quote because it kind of points to the idea of taking your practice outside of the dojo and finding little ways to make it fun to practice outside. I don't think that Miyagi was suggesting that you always want to be like on high alert and imagining that somebody would attack you at any given moment, because that can be kind of stressful. But you're choosing a specific instance. I'm turning a corner and I'm aware, because who knows what's on the other side. I like to play this game with myself. When I come home, I just take a moment and imagine, like, all right, what would I do if somebody was sitting right there and they popped up and came to attack me? And then I let it go. I don't think about it all the time. But this has actually come in handy for me. A lot of you guys know that I have been in a real fight precisely 0 times in my life. And I know that what we teach works, because I know that it works, and also because we've had students who have been attacked. We've had several students who've been attacked, both here in our schools and the schools back in Michigan, and they've always won the fight. They've always been able to defend themselves successfully. But I would think that even though that is a really cool story to get attacked and be able to defend yourself, practically speaking, it's better to not have to actually get attacked and fight anybody in the first place. So an example from my past, one of my friends always brings it up because he was there with me when this happened, but I was just walking down the street in some neighborhood, I think it may have been Hollywood or something, and was walking with my friend and his fiance, and there was just a shady guy following like right behind us, and he just followed us for blocks, and I could tell that something was weird, so I just kind of I turned myself towards my friends and was talking to them while keeping my eye out on this guy who was following, and I made sure that he never got too close to us. We got to their car. We opened the doors to get in, and the guy started trying to get into the car with us. Then I just said, "Can I help you?" And he said, "Oh, no, it's cool." And he just shut the door and walked away. And he was probably just messing with us, but you never know. Somebody could try to pull out a weapon or just, do something crazy at any time. So it's a good idea to take your training and your mindfulness out into everyday life. And oftentimes it's as simple as just literally keeping your eyes open on somebody who's being weird, or having the confidence to talk to somebody or to tell them to leave you alone. So one more quote. Well, we've got two more quotes. He says, this is one of the cheesier quotes, but it's nice. He says, when your temper rises, lower your fists. When your fists rise, lower your temper. And this is also kind of the yin and yang and the recognition of up and down. And sometimes we don't know that we're pissed off until we're actually physically tense. We're maybe even like moving ourselves physically into a confrontation, or when we're practicing in the dojo, you're grappling with somebody and you recognize that your mind is not right because of the physical sensation of your body, the tension or the breathing is off. And it would be nice to recognize the state of your mind before it gets to the body, but usually that's happening very quickly. So we can use our practice in that way to recognize our mental state and be able to deal with it the best way. And the last one, he says, studying karate nowadays is like walking in the dark without a lantern. We have to grope our way in the dark, said Miyagi sensei. He also told me there are so many things in karate which do not make sense. There are a lot of things that I cannot understand. Therefore, while our grandmasters are still alive, we have to see them and ask many questions. I think it is still very difficult to find the answers, even if we do so. So I definitely agree that sometimes practicing martial arts can seem like this metaphor of groping around in the dark, like I've got no lantern, I have no idea where I'm going. I'm kind of feeling things out and trying to see where to go next. And it's very important to have the wisdom and the direction of the people who've been here longer than us, who've been practicing martial arts sometimes for decades or their entire life. And so you guys have me, and we have Sifu Brown, and we have the stories of the elders and the people who came before, and it's important to look to them. But I also like the phrase, do not seek to follow in the footsteps of the masters. Seek what they thought, or seek what they sought. So you don't necessarily want to do exactly the same thing just for the sake of doing exactly the same thing. If you're seeking the highest wisdom, or you're seeking to go further, you want to seek the same things that these masters sought. This is one of my favorite quotes in Kodo. I'm not even going to try to quote it, but I'm going to paraphrase it. He says, it's every teacher's greatest desire, basically, to be a stepping stone. You want to be a stepping stone that those who came behind you, those who come after you, they step up to where you are, and then they continue to go further than that. So that's what all of us want. And on some level, when I practice with somebody who every once in a while gets the better of me when we're sparring or grappling, part of me wants to go, oh, I'm supposed to win, I'm the teacher. But it's okay if it happens every once in a while. My ego can handle it. And then I recognize, this is great. This person has transcended on some level something that I've taught them, and they're continuing to go further. So I truly hope that all of us can use our teachers and our masters as a stepping stone and continuing to go forward, but not forget the wisdom and just throw these people by the wayside, because then you really will just be groping for knowledge and darkness. So we're going to meditate, and there's nothing in here what I just read about meditation, but I'm going to assume that Miyagi meditated, and for sure there is this complete value of practice, physical practice as a moving meditation, and for sure Miyagi had that experience, or he wouldn't have practiced for decades and decades and became one of the greatest masters of all time. So we're going to seek a little bit of that wisdom and a little bit of that focus and that centeredness with our sitting meditation. Sit comfortably.